What is going on, everybody? We have made it to one of my favorite times of the year, draft grades season, baby. I'm especially excited for all of those incoming comments telling me just how useless draft grades are. Look, I know one thing. I didn't spend the last 4 months grinding college tape to not tell you guys how I think every team found value in this weekend's NFL draft, and how I see all of these players fitting in with their new teams. Today, I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on every single pick from the NFC South, including any undrafted free agent steals that stood out to me as well. Before we do get started though, guys, if you could do me a huge favor, take just a second to hit that like button down below. I know it sounds silly, but especially in a video like this, it does such a good job telling YouTube to suggest this video out to other NFL sickos just like you guys, so I really appreciate if you could take just a second to hit that down below. And of course, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss all 8 of my divisional draft grades videos. But let's go ahead and get started with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who kick things off here with their first round pick, Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver out of Ohio State. I think when that name rolled off the board, I think many draft junkies were just a little shocked, frankly, that they went wide receiver and that they went with Emeka Egbuka as well. And of all of the first round picks, I don't really know how to feel about this one, what to necessarily grade it. Like, honestly, my gut tells me I don't really like this pick for the Bucs. I think he's redundant with some of the players they have there. Now, he's definitely their type, right? Like, there's a lot of similarities between him and Chris Godwin, but you did just bring Chris Godwin back on the 3-year, $60 million deal. And I've said that McMillan as well, who looked good last year, is also kind of in that skill set as a slot guy that's good after the catch and in a straight line over the middle of the field. So to go another one of those guys in that mold, when there were guys like Luther Burden and Matthew Golden available, both who were better wide receivers for me, even if this is correct value for Egbuka, I just don't fully understand him being the wide receiver they went with. And then to not take guys like Jahad Campbell and perhaps an edge rusher, like, I don't know, man. If I'm a Bucs fan, like, I'm excited to eventually see Egbuka play, but I don't know that I'm all that ecstatic about this draft pick. I can't slam it. Again, this is a good player. It's hard to fault a team for taking a good player with the 19th pick, but I do think fans of other NFC teams that were looking at the Bucs and kind of what they've done this offseason as a dangerous team in the NFC, this pick rolls off the board and it's like, all right, well, they're not really getting better this year with this pick in a year that I think the Bucs were really setting themselves up well. So I did go B, but that almost feels too high just kind of thinking and feeling about this pick. I just wasn't all that big of a fan of this one for where the Bucs are at. But then in the second round, they are the team that rolls the dice with Benjamin Morrison. He was always going to be a very fascinating player to track in this draft. We all agree, I think the talent is tremendous. And if that hip injury never rolled up on him in his junior season, very likely talking about a top 15, top 20 pick, and maybe even the number 1 corner in this draft class with fluid hips, good speed, can play zone, can play man. I think he needs to get a little bit more physical as a tackler, more consistent there, but he's fine enough there. But it is scary to think about a cornerback coming off a hip injury whose biggest strength is his hip fluidity and his ability to turn and run. So I love taking the gamble on him in the second round, but it is absolutely a gamble, right? I remember Andrew Booth falling to the second round. The Vikings took him, and it's like, that's an A grade, but the medicals is why he was there. So it does get a little bit scary, but at this point, past the top 50 picks of the draft, I think you absolutely roll the dice on him. I didn't give this one an A+ though, just because quite clearly a lot of NFL teams were scared by that injury, and I don't know that this was, some tremendous surprise that he was there with the 20th pick in the second round. But needless to say, the upside is there. I've talked about how, they need another corner, but also Jamel Dean probably going to be on his last year there in Tampa Bay. So very much worth the risk. And then I don't mind if you are acknowledging that Morrison just might not be able to give it a go for you. just take another really good corner who was, I can only imagine, one of the best players, if not the best player left on their board, with Jacob Parrish in the 3rd round. And I think he's absolutely a Todd Bowles type. He's physical, he's fast, really good man-to-man corner. And I like this because, you know, I do think he needs to learn zone rules and how to anticipate better from zone. He played a lot of man at Kansas State. When he played zone, you could tell he just didn't fully know what he was looking for there. But this is an opportunity for him to really develop those skills and potentially be your Jamel Dean replacement in a year. He brings a lot of that speed that someone like Dean has to follow faster wide receivers around. So I do like the double dip strategy here. One guy who's got to learn zone coverage, one guy who's got to get healthy. Probability is one of these guys is going to work out in the league. And if both do, hell yeah, they could frankly use both of these guys. So I do like what they did on day 2 quite a lot. Both those picks got A grades for me. But then you go to the 4th round. The Bucs steal probably my biggest true my guy in this draft in David Walker, edge out of Central Arkansas, someone I have talked obviously a lot about in this pre-draft process, someone that was a top 50 player in this draft, in my opinion, a 6 foot, 260 pound edge rusher who is shorter, but built, and he comes in at a low pad level and he attacks a leverage point that offensive linemen just don't know how to handle. He's got a bull rush, he's got a rip move, and with his profile, that's about all he needs. And against his level of competition, he racked up, I believe, the best pass rush win rate that PFF has ever charted. Watching his games, you could tell his opponents at that level of competition knew who the NFL player was. Like, they were double teaming him, they were sliding to him. He would still get through those at times, but the second he got a one-on-one, he was hitting the quarterback. Like, this dude's tape was just purely dominant at Central Arkansas. He goes to the Senior Bowl and he balls out. I thought, as all of these 2nd round edge rushers have something that they've got to prove, whether it's bulking up or developing a pass rush move or whatever it might be. Mike Green has to prove that he's not a piece of shit. All David Walker has to prove is that his historically great pass rush win rate can transfer from Central Arkansas up to that next level, and he already showed you a sign that that's going to happen with his dominance at the Senior Bowl. So to get him in the 4th round, someone that, shit, man, if they took him over Emeka Egbuka with the 19th pick, I'd maybe even like that better for them. Because I did think getting one more piece that can collapse the pocket and get after the quarterback from the edge was something that was really going to help them. You know, you got Yaya Diaby, especially for the long haul. You know, this year you've got Hassan Reddick, but Reddick was, you know, not great last year. There's a chance that Reddick's not great for you this year. So you get another high upside guy. You know, if he hits, you're talking about an Olivier Vernon or a Brandon Graham type of player. Both guys that won with kind of that similar style with that, you know, compact, low to the earth build with those rip moves and with those bull rushes. So this was probably the biggest steal of the draft, in my opinion, frankly. Kind of makes me forget about having some questions about the Egbuka pick off the bat there. And things are getting really weird, Bucs fans. I like Jason Light, if you're watching, hey, hello, I'm on to you. It's wild. 2020, one of my biggest my guys was Antoine Winfield, who was a top 20 player in that draft for me. He goes in the 2nd round and is an all-pro safety. 2022, I loved Luke Gedicke. He goes in the 2nd round. He's a great right tackle. And Zion McCollum, I had as a day 2 guy that year. They take him in the 5th round. He's coming up on a big payday. That's kind of why they draft these corners and why they think Jamel Dean's going to probably be out the door after this year. Then this last draft, Tyke Smith was my number 1 safety in the draft, or at least tied with Malik Mustafa for my number 1 safety with a 2nd round grade. He goes in the 4th round and, you know, was an early candidate for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Couldn't quite sustain his production because he got hurt, but he's an awesome young player. And now here we go, David Walker in the 4th round. This is very deja vu for the Bucs that seem to consistently get my guys, and they've had a really nice track record as well. So let's hope that continues here for the Bucs. Then they wrap up their draft getting Elijah Roberts out of SMU, very much that hybrid end that fits their system. I think we get one more year of Logan Hall in that role, and then I would definitely see Elijah Roberts competing to overtake that spot. I did have him right around this range, 5th, 6th round, so I'm not going to necessarily bang the drum and say, yeah, great pick. Like, he's definitely going to take the Logan Hall role, but that's what they're looking for, if nothing else, and the athletic profile is there for him to be able to do that. So we'll see how he can kind of develop and fit in here in Tampa. And then why the hell not take a dice roll on Tez Johnson in the 7th round? I don't know if he's going to make this team. You probably end up cutting either Trey Palmer or Sterling Shepard, or you keep 7 wide receivers. But just a pure physical outlier, right? A 154-pound wide receiver, but he gets open, and he showed that at the Senior Bowl. He can get open. He showed it in college. He can get open, and he catches the ball. He's super instinctive, so why not bring him in and see what happens late in the 7th round for a pretty deep roster. So I ended up giving the Bucs an A grade, even if the Igbuka pick doesn't pop off the page and oh my God, it's going to help you right now. It's still a damn good player there at 19 that they're eventually going to be really happy that they have. And of course, if Godwin can't get back to speed coming off the injury, or someone does get hurt, it's incredible depth to have for now. And then you're walking out of the day 2 spot with, you would think, at least 1 starting corner, 2 guys with great upside as well. And then to get David Walker in the 4th round, just incredible value. Honestly, if you're bummed about not getting an impact from Igbuka and maybe not taking a guy like Ezeraku, who was consistently mocked to them with that 19th spot, you completely make up for it with how I feel about David Walker. So calling my shot, of course, with him going in the 4th round and being that good. But we've had a pretty good record of doing that with this team in the past, so I'm gonna stick with it. By the way, I didn't mention their undrafted free agent additions that were interesting. Jake Majors, I think, has a chance to be a good backup center for them. Worth a shout out as an undrafted pickup there. And then Desmond Watson, I mean, just I like that they're taking a chance on some of these kind of physical outliers here, right? David Walker was one of those guys. Tez Johnson's one of those guys. And then, yeah, I mean, if you get a chance to bring in the 460-pound nose tackle in Desmond Watson and say, what happens if we put him next to Vita Vea? How do teams find running against that? I love that. So that's another fun thing they did. But an excellent draft for the Tampa Bay Bucs, obviously, and Jason Licht just continues to prove how good he is at this. When I did my GM rankings back in, what was that, December, when I did my tier rankings for front offices, I had Tampa Bay in the elite tier, and I think they backed that up with a tremendous draft here, an A grade from me. But now it is time to talk about the very polarizing Atlanta Falcons draft. And I'm going to say, Falcons fans, I'm much higher on your draft than I think most people. But there is a lot to talk about here, and we might be talking in circles a little bit because there's multiple trades and some good things to say about the 2 edge rushers they took in the 1st round, and of course trading their 1st round pick next year to come back into this year's 1st round to take James Pierce Jr. But let's get into it. So they take Jalen Walker with the 15th pick in the draft, and I would say this is about the earliest that I would accept Jalen Walker coming off the board and not call it a reach. It's still earlier than I'm comfortable with Jalen Walker, and I will say, man, for all of the talk about our next team here, the Carolina Panthers taking him with the 8th pick, that was just crazy talk to me for a guy that played a hybrid linebacker role for Georgia, but wasn't actually good at the linebacker stuff, was tough to watch in coverage, wasn't good at going through read keys or getting off blocks. He is a edge rusher. He is a pass rushing player that doesn't have the typical physical measurables to say he's got absurd upside off the edge. Now, when he won, you saw that upside. You see the ability to convert speed to power. You see the power that he has in his core when he goes to that rip move that was essentially only used against guards as a mugged up rush linebacker at Georgia. But you see his bend and the ability to rip through blocks, and you say, okay, if we can put you on the edge and you start to develop a pass rushing profile, there could be something in there with you as a potential impact pass rusher off the edge. But man, there's a lot of projecting going on with that skill set. I had a late first, early second round grade on Jalen Walker. So to take him at 15, it is still early for me. But you go the hometown kid. I like that he fits their system as a 3-4 front. You can do some of that edge dropping stuff. They are very good at using these guys as loopers and of course dropping them into spot zones where he's going to be comfortable. So like, it's a B draft pick for me. Obviously fills a need, but a little bit earlier than I was comfortable with on the player. But then, of course, they trade up. They give up their second round pick and their first round pick next year. They do get back a late third in this deal, which is going to come into play with all of this analysis here. But essentially giving up your first round pick next year while moving from the second round down to the third round to come back into the first round this year and take another edge rusher in James Pierce Jr. And this is where my mind just kind of spins because there's so much to break down here. There's some stuff I like about this, though. Number one, I think James Pierce Jr. with the 26th pick in the draft is tremendous value. If this was a team just sticking here at 26 and the player of James Pierce's caliber, who in my opinion, his tape is top 10 tape as an edge rusher, a premium position, great athlete. He wins with speed to power. He's got the ability to, obviously threaten the outside with his speed. He's got inside swipes. I thought he was arguably even better than someone like Jalen Walker when he dropped into coverage. He would like man up backs out of the backfield and do some really good stuff there. So he brings that to the table too as a 3-4 stand-up player. Again, if someone's just sticking there at 26, that's an A-plus pick for me. But then you factor in like, yeah, okay, we kind of knew he was going to fail because there's all this smoke about character concerns and stuff. So probably more of an A pick. But the fact that they did overpay to come up and get him, ultimately that's why I gave this individual pick a B. But look, man, the Falcons have spent 8-9 years being held back by their pass rush, and they have learned the hard way how hard it is to take a second or third round edge rusher and get a starting caliber player out of him. Now, this draft class was unique in that it was super deep and there were some opportunities to find those guys down the board, but it's still hard to do that. And for the Falcons to say, when you're Terry Fontenot, who I think is on the hot seat, he hasn't done a great job with this roster, in my opinion. Your Raheem Morris, who I think is on the hot seat. This defense stunk last year after they brought him in as a defensive head coach. I think both these guys are on the hot seat, and they want to get this thing going, man. They want to start winning games. And if you're Raheem Morris and you look at this roster, you're like, well, shit, man, we need two edge rushers. Arnold Ebiketie is probably more of a 3 at this point. Yeah, Leonard Floyd, like, fine as a Band-Aid, but not ideally going to be a starter. The Niners let him go for a reason. Braylon Trice, your third-round pick last year, wasn't able to stay healthy. Like, you got pressure to win right here. Your roster's in a pretty good spot other than that edge room. And why not basically take next year's first-round pick and drop it into this year's first round and get a guy like James Pierce? You can absolutely sell me on that idea. But two things. You better be right that all these character concerns on James Pierce and the reason he was there with the 26th pick to begin with are right. And number two, you better start winning some goddamn football games, because if you just gave a top 10 pick to the Rams, that's going to look horrible. And this is an absolutely risky move. But at the end of the day, I don't fully hate it. It costs them a lot. I think you could beg the question of, if you're comfortable with James Pierce's off-field stuff, why not take him at 15 and then see what pieces you maybe could go to in the second round and keep your first round pick next year? But ultimately, for a team that has whiffed time and time and time again on edge rusher, you get two chances here with two really talented players, and if they both hit, freaking awesome. You need them both to hit. Well, you don't need them both to hit, but you could use them both to hit. And if they do both hit, you're really in business, right? So it was a lot, but I went with B's on both these picks. I don't fully hate this strategy for the Falcons, especially now as we transition to their next pick. So remember, yes, they gave up a second and next year's first to go get James Pierce, but they did get a late third back from the Rams, which is critical here because they then take that and some smaller pieces and come up about 6 spots and grab Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame. And that to me is one of the steals of this entire draft for a Falcons defense that, okay, after you take those 2 edge rushers, the remaining need for them is that other safety spot. You know, they signed Jordan Fuller as a Band-Aid safety. Ask Panthers fans how Falcons fans should feel about Jordan Fuller out there as a starter for them. It wasn't great, man. That 1 year with the Rams where he was really good is kind of shown to be an outlier for him. Xavier Watts is always around the ball, and when he is, he's got great ball skills. He's got unbelievable zone IQ, anticipation from quarters coverage. Yeah, he might not be as fast as a Nicky Manwari or even a Billy Bowman who they took and some of these other guys, but he's a step ahead of where those guys would be anyway because he has such an elite understanding of how offenses are attacking him and what his coverage assignment is, when he can gamble, when he's got to stay back. Yeah, he might have been one of the least physically talented safeties drafted here over the course of this weekend. But physically speaking, he's very similar to Xavier McKinney, to Tyler Nubin, who was a slam dunk second-round pick for the Giants last year. I think they get something in between that spectrum right there. At the ass end of the 3rd round, it just completely makes up, in my opinion, for the value that you gave up to go get James Pierce. And I look at this defense now and I feel so much better about this group. Like, this was going to be the Falcons' problem next year. And there's a chance that they fixed their defensive roster problems with this draft, even if it cost them a 1st rounder next year to do that. And I think that's exciting if you're a Falcons fan. And you're excited to see what, Michael Penix and this group is going to do next year, and you think you can compete in this NFC South. So, again, I was higher on what the Falcons did, but there's obviously a lot going on here, and you do have to ding them for really overpaying in that trade-up. Like, if you look at your classic, pick value chart, and you project the same 15th pick for the Falcons next year, they gave up 1,400 something points on the pick value chart to get 800 points with that late first. And basically it just comes down to the Falcons for making sure their pick is in the 20s next year so that value comes back closer together. But let's go ahead and move on. I think you get where I'm coming from and where I stand on that first couple days of the draft for them. Just a couple more picks remaining here. They got Billy Bowman out of Oklahoma. It's about where I had him going, 4th, 5th round. Interesting. It sounds like they're going to try him in the nickel. When they drafted him, I was especially confused because for me, Billy Bowman most likely was going to be like a dime package free safety, but you don't want to take Jesse Bates out of free safety situations ever. So I was like, well, I don't know that he's a starting safety because he had some of the worst tackling problems I've ever seen from a college prospect. He missed 27% of his tackles throughout his time at Oklahoma. He has abysmally short arms for the position, and that's part of why he misses so many tackles. So hard to see him being a starter, more of a kind of dime package safety with his coverage ability and ball skills. But again, if Jesse Bates is going to be the free safety, that was going to be kind of awkward. But if they're going to try him as a nickel corner, I could see, he's got the twitch. He's more of the size of a nickel corner, and I could see it. Now, he's got to prove that he can tackle, period, no matter where he's playing if he's going to get on the field. But I do think the Falcons could use a nickel, and it would be really cool to see Bowman, who is a really nice coverage player, if that transition to more of a slot corner works for him, as opposed to being more of a safety where the run defense demands can be just a little different. There's still big run defense demands as a nickel corner, and that lack of arm length can still hurt him, but it can't really be any worse than his tackling ability as a safety. And then they grabbed Jack Nelson out of Wisconsin. I didn't quite get to Jack Nelson's tape, but was on my radar as a 6th, 7th round kind of draft and stash backup lineman, so solid enough pick. Not a ton to write home about on day 3. They did have some interesting undrafted free agent pickups. So they get Nick Nash. A lot of people were asking me about Nick Nash because obviously the stats, the production was insane. He wins the college football triple crown last year. I wanted to like his tape so much more, but I don't think he's going to be able to really separate against man-to-man at the next level. He's a smart, kind of big slot type of receiver. I wanted to see him go to like a McVay Shanahan style system, and fortunately he does, right? This is that McVay style offense here. And outside of Drake London doing that stuff, they don't really have that role. So maybe he could be like, dollar store diet soda version of Cooper Kupp in this offense, something to at least monitor as a role fit in this scheme. But then also Kobe Bryant, I had him kind of right neck and neck with someone like Billy Bowman, who's like a talented DB, but is his size going to be too much of an issue for him at the next level? So you kind of get two of those guys. I think Kobe Bryant, who's actually played, corner, and I think projected as a potential nickel as well. He's very physical against the run. He just can only do so much at 171 pounds. I thought Kobe Bryant was like dollar store Diet Coke Devon Witherspoon. So we'll see how that one works out, but super quick and instinctive, and a fun undrafted pickup there as well. So kind of a couple of extra free draft picks, if you will, on some draftable players, in my opinion, in undrafted free agency. But I ultimately settled on a B+ grade for the Falcons. I couldn't quite go into the A range because I do think Jalen Walker was early and they gave up their first round pick next year, but still a good draft grade. And I still think this could work out for them, even if you're going to get to next year's draft and feel the pain a little bit more. And this is very, very risky, but it does feel pretty solid at this point in time. But let's go to, in my opinion, a candidate for the best draft in the 2025 NFL draft. Panthers fans, say it with me. Keep. Let's go, Panthers. Let's go, baby. What a draft. Number one with the 8th pick. So happy they did not take Jalen Walker, man. I saw Panthers fans complaining about this on Twitter. I promise you, it's going to be okay. They go with the best player on the board, a guy that I thought this whole process, it was going to be a dream if the Panthers could have gotten their number one wide receiver, T-Mac Tet McMillan, out of Arizona. And then the last couple weeks, it starts creeping up that he might fall a little bit in the draft. And I sat there in my final mock draft and I was like, man, there's going to be some teams that don't love him, but there's going to be some teams that absolutely do. Because you talk to probably 3/4 of people in the draft industry, they thought, just like I did, he's a top 5 player in the draft. I went as far as saying T-Mac was one of 4 blue chip prospects in this draft, and I don't go throwing that term blue chip around. I've had drafts like the Evan Neal Thibodeau year where I didn't even have a blue chip prospect in that draft. I had 4 this year, being Carter, Ginty, Travis Hunter, and T-Mac. So to get that level player at pick 8 at a position of need, frankly, for the Panthers, I don't think this was discussed enough, and I was a little worried when I saw the Panthers, staff was like in interviews, they were kind of alluding to the fact that they felt pretty good about this wide receiver core, and I'm like, look, man, it was a good feeling how the offense played at the end of last year, but Xavier Legette still has to learn how to drop, how not to drop passes. You've got a very old Adam Thielen. Coker's a fun guy that you should probably view as a wide receiver 4 heading into the year. Like, what are we doing acting like this wide receiver group is good to go? And there were plenty of times last year as Bryce is, figuring things out and dealing these key back-breaking drops that now you can look back on and say, thank you, Xavier Legette, for that drop against the Eagles. Thank you, Xavier Legette, for various other big drops, and thank you to the rest of the receiving core for other big moments where those guys couldn't step up, because it allowed you to lose enough games in the end where you still get T-Mac, because I don't know how many other teams were going to be passing on him realistically. But the reason I have him as a blue chip player in this draft is I think he has a legitimate chance to be a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL before not so long. A guy his size should not be able to run routes the way he does. No, he doesn't have absurd speed to always separate in a straight line, right? Like, you're gonna see for a 6'4+ wide receiver, you're gonna see some really fast corners be able to stay in his hip pocket and run man-to-man with him, but more often than not, it doesn't matter because a lot of the corners that are fast enough to keep up with him can't high point the football like T-Mac can. So for Bryce to just have a guy to trust it when he is covered, love that. But the reality is he does create a lot of separation. He's awesome against zone coverage, where McMillan doesn't get enough credit for all of this talk about this freshman year interview and all this bullshit that he doesn't care about football. The tape shows a highly intelligent route runner against zone coverage. He paces his routes in and out of zones. He works back to the quarterback. He works in scramble drill exceptionally well. Bryce is going to love that about him. He is every bit a high IQ football player. Like, for him to be able to stop on a dime like he does at his size, it's really special. Teams do respect him over the top because he is a vertical weapon. Even if he's not going to always stack you on the outside with his speed, he can do that. And even if you cover him, like I said, he can win a tough catch. So he can throttle down and decelerate and get open on a hitch route, comebackers. He's good running dig routes, in my opinion, against off coverage. Like, he can absolutely run routes and get open. And then the final, just crazy cherry on top with T-Mac is the run after catch, man. He was behind just Luther Burden in missed tackles forced last year. He's shifty. He's elusive. He's obviously tough to get down. I think he's got a second gear with the ball in his hands where he does outrun defenses really, really well. I just never really understood this wave of hate that came towards T-Mac over the last 2-3 weeks leading up to the draft process. I think the Patriots made a huge mistake not taking him with the 4th pick, and the Panthers are the absolute benefactors here. This was one of my favorite picks in the draft. I think it's going to take the offense from they were fun and showed some promise, but you're heading into the year still, I think, feeling pretty shaky about that offense, frankly, with the playmakers in a way that in where they were at. Dropping T-Mac into that, on top of some of the other stuff that they did, I think there's reason to believe that they can elevate from where they were last year, as opposed to you were just kind of praying they could get back to what they were at the end of last year and feel good about that. And then the last thing to say is just mentioning how perfect his game mixes in with their existing talent. I saw some people saying you should call the Panthers about Xavier Legette, or does this mean they're giving up on Xavier Legette? Absolutely the F not does it mean they're giving up on Xavier Legette. This makes Xavier Legette, who was picked at the back end of the first round, able to slide into the exact role that he should be playing as a Z wide receiver with a limited route tree, running slants, go balls, and hitch routes and flare routes where you can pop the ball out to him on a screen. The idea of asking Xavier Legette to be your X and have to handle a lot more on his plate was scary. But now he can just focus on running in a straight line and catching the football and let T-Mac handle a lot of the tougher stuff. And then they have slot options as well in the inside there. We're going to talk about Jimmy Horn later, but you have Adam Thielen obviously still there. They're going to give it another go with Hunter Renfrow. He's going to be a fun story to watch. Sounds like the reason he wasn't in the league was he was dealing with ulcerative colitis and was down to 150 pounds. Now he's up to 185, ready to play football again. So that has some potential. This wide receiver core could legitimately be one of the best in the NFL next year for Bryce Young. And that's when their offensive line was already really good last year. So for them to go from what they were in year one, when we were slamming this team for all the stuff they gave up to get Bryce, to be where they are now with this offense, absolutely, man. Absolutely the perfect pick for the Panthers. And to not go Jalen Walker, again, just an extra cherry on top of all this, in my opinion. Especially as we get to this next pick, where they take a couple of extra picks, and I know it sounds like I'm glowing about this front office because I just think Dan Morgan has come in and done a brilliant job, one of the best GM jobs over the last 2 years of any team, in my opinion. He loaded up on day 3 picks, right? He rights the wrong on Jonathan Mingo, gets a 4th round pick from Dallas. They've made various other trades as well where they've actually recouped a ton of picks here. This pick alone, the original 2nd round pick that they just had to come up a few spots with, was in a trade down last year where they got that extra second round pick from the Rams, who came up for Braden Fisk. So the Panthers weren't supposed to have a second round pick this year. They weren't. That was still a part of the Bryce Young trade, but this new regime came in, got this pick, and then played the board right where, like, man, Nick Scorton's there with the 19th pick in the second round. Let's take whichever, combo platter of picks it was and just go up a little bit and secure Nick Scorton. The pick after this, the Titans ended up taking Oladejo. I would imagine they would have been interested in Nick Scorton as well. Very similar type of player there. So playing the board for a guy that I don't think was going to make it to them, and I don't think he was going to make it to them because for me, he was a top 50 player in this draft, and someone that if he did go in the first round at the very back end to a team like Philly or Kansas City or Buffalo, I would have thought it was a really good pick. And like shit, man, I had almost the same grade I had on Nick Scorton as I did on Jalen Walker. I think Walker has a little bit more upside, and he was a tick ahead of Scorton, but I do think Scorton's more ready to come in and help this team right now than Jalen Walker was. So to not go Walker at 8 and then somehow walk away with Nick Scorton in the second round is unbelievable. Obviously, we knew this team was going to be targeting edge with all of the talk about Walker there with that 8th pick. And he's just going to come in and fill that second starting hole right away, in my opinion, opposite of Jadeveon Clowney. And Scorton's fascinating because if he just is what he is at Texas A&M, I think he can be a nice number 2 edge rusher. I don't think he's overly dynamic. He's not overly powerful. But he's highly crafty. He's got a cross chop. He's got a spin move. He's excellent with his hands. He's got pretty good bend for a guy that played at 280 pounds at Texas A&M. But what gets me really excited about Scorton is I felt like Texas A&M really did him dirty, asking him to play at 280 pounds in that system. And especially his play style really alludes to someone that should be playing somewhere in the 250s because he wins with finesse, agility-based pass rush moves. And to do that at 280 pounds is really freaking hard. And he did it because he has quick feet for a big guy and he has good bend. But I can't wait to see him play at 257 or 260 or whatever it's going to be because he might really be able to sink his hips and bend. He might really have a nasty spin move. He might have a lethal cross chop. Like, his moves, I think, project better at his new weight. And they're going to keep him there because this is more of a 3-4 system, and he can do that. Like, he can absolutely stand up and rush standing up. He did that at Texas A&M. So, man, just a tremendous, tremendous pick in the second round. And while I said, his floor, is relatively close to being more of a number 2 in the league based on what he was at Texas A&M, I think with everything we said about him dropping weight, he could be kind of a low-end number 1 type of pass rusher. So I'm stoked, man. But they don't stop there. They come up again in the third round. They go with the double dip strategy, knowing you can't always be so certain that the guy you took is going to hit, knowing how desperate they are for edge help, seeing a guy like Princely Emmanuel, who I can only imagine they, like myself, viewed as a second-round talent. But if both these guys hit, just like we said with the Falcons, fantastic. Jadeveon Clowney's not going to be playing around here forever. He's on the last year of his deal. If both these guys hit, that's unbelievable. But Princely's a great prospect in his own right. I think day one, he can step in and help you get after the quarterback in a designated pass rusher role. If Clowney or Scorton are either hurt or, fatigued from playing early down work, I think Emmanuel can come in with his bend and his spin move and the production he had at Ole Miss and at Florida before that, all against SEC opponents, and step into the NFL level and create some pressure on the quarterback and finish some pass rushes and get you off the field on third downs, which was such a problem for this Panthers team last year. And in his case, I think that is his floor. He is currently a very slender player. He can't really play the run on early downs. He doesn't have much of a power profile. There's flashes of him converting speed to power, but for me, if he's ever going to be more of a starter, you want to see him bulk up, and I think he can, especially in his upper half. And I think if you bulk up in the upper half, you could add play strength to his game without losing too much of his athletic profile. But I think to really go for it with this edge group after you take the wide receiver round 1 was phenomenal process for the Panthers. But we're not done. As we get to day 3, I love the Trevor Etienne pick at the top of the 4th round for how he fits inside this offense. He is a true scat back style back, right? Like, he's a great route runner. I think he showed really smooth hands in a lot of his high-end pass catching reps. He's got lightning quick feet, awesome acceleration, good top speed. It's just, in terms of vision and power and running between the tackles, there's very little there. Now, the Panthers do like themselves some wide zone. They run a diverse run game, but they can absolutely run wide zone. And I think Trevor Etienne has some upside to be a little better in more of a wide zone oriented rushing game. So, I think there's some potential there, but I just think, with Chuba Hubbard being such a workhorse and Rico Dowdle's going to eat into some of those early down carries, get your third down back that is going to catch screens, flares out of the backfield, and be yet another pass catching option for you. Someone that you can legitimately run like angle routes and two-way goes, stuff that he has shown that he can do really well. And just be yet another headache for defenses to try to cover out of the backfield. So, 4th round pick as a really impactful role player there with some upside as a running back. He actually reminds me a lot of what James Cook was coming out of Georgia. I don't know that he can improve his vision and his contact balance in the way that James Cook was able to do in the pros. But if he does, that's even house money here. But just as a receiving back, I absolutely love it. And I also think, by the way, with these new kick return rules, he has some potential to help you in that phase of the game as well. Now, the one pick they made that I just wasn't a fan of was this Lathan Ransom pick out of Ohio State. I think Ransom's okay. Obviously, kind of a key member of that championship Ohio State defense. He's got a sick name, but he had very minimal ball production. I didn't see a lot of instincts in coverage, and he looks to put on that hit stick all the time. Like, his highlight reel is going to look awesome, but down in, down out, he leaves his feet, he lunges at guys, he misses a fair share of tackles. I had him as a 5th, 6th round guy and kind of a special teamer, and probably never an impactful starter. He's not that fast either. Personally, to not take Malachi Moore, who's like the perfect scheme fit in my opinion, who goes about 8 picks later, I think, that one really stung. And I would kind of call my shot that that's a pick they're going to regret. But they get right back to work with some phenomenal picks. They take Cam Jackson, D-lineman out of Florida. I thought was a 4th round, early day 3 guy all the way. They take him here at the top of the 5th. So that lines up. But I love, man, getting another defensive tackle on this defensive line that's been such a problem for this team. Another guy that can play, man. So you look at what they had last year where Derek Brown goes down, and they're calling now on, it's Shy Tuttle, A'Shawn Robinson, and then even the guys after that, it was like LeBrian Ray and like Sam Roberts, I think. Like, that, it was just hard to see who their rotational defensive tackles were, especially, but even the starters. Cam Jackson is an instant upgrade to that type of guy right there. He's got a ton of size. He's a true early down D tackle. I think he can work on his pad level to take on double teams as a true nose tackle better, but he's got a couple of mentors in the building that are going to be really good for him there with Bobby Brown. A'Shawn Robinson is still here. Obviously, Derek Brown. But I think he can play as a 3 technique and stop the run as a huge body, as a rotational piece. And to get that in the 5th round, I think is especially for this Panthers team, really, really valuable for where they've been. And then Mitchell Evans, the tight end out of Notre Dame, I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on him. I think he can play, man, and he's fascinating because he was really making a name for himself in the 2023 season, tears his ACL, comes back in 2024, and kind of a little bit slower out the gate, recovering from that ACL. But you load up the last few games of his final season at Notre Dame, and you see a guy that you think can play in the league. And I think he can be a starting possession tight end in the league. I think his upside is something like Cole Kmet coming out of Notre Dame. I think if he didn't tear his ACL, he might have built up the momentum to be something like a 2nd round pick there. And this is a type of tight end that the Panthers don't have. They don't have a full-sized Y tight end. We know they want to run the piss out of the football, right? They showed us that last year. But when your blocking tight ends are, Jatavion Sanders and Tommy Tremble, Like, I like Tommy Tremble as like a lead blocker, as a number 2 tight end on the wing, but he's a smaller tight end. Like Mitchell Evans gives you full inline ability. He does need to work on his technique a little bit more, but man, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a part of the starting rotation with these tight ends. And then for the long haul, I love how him and Jatavion Sanders could play off each other, with Evans being kind of the Y tight end for certain packages. And then Jatavion Sanders, if you want to spread things out a little bit more, or go 12 personnel, or use him as more of that receiving-based tight end, I think that's very natural for him as well. So I thought that was an excellent pick in the 5th round. And then Jimmy Horn Jr. out of Colorado, man. Absolutely a good pick. I think he fits right into this room as a backup slot wide receiver to Adam Thielen. What a great mentor to have there. But, Jimmy Horn, it was a volume issue for him. They had a lot of mouths to feed at Colorado, and obviously Travis Hunter got a large target share, but Jimmy Horn was kind of splitting with LeJontay Webster, who was another slot wide receiver for them that got drafted. And, the final production for him wasn't there, but the snap-by-snap tape on him is really exciting. He runs routes, and he can return kicks for you while he backs you up in the slot there. So I think that made a ton of sense for what they needed. And then they even get one of my favorite undrafted free agents out there in Kobe Hudson, someone I found like very early in the process, didn't really generate any buzz because he's not someone that's going to test very well. And he ran a little bit slower than I was expecting him to, but he did actually like stack corners on the outside. I think he played a little bit faster than the 4.57 I think he ended up running. But honestly, in my opinion, one of the better route runners in this class, made tremendous catches at UCF, had some frustrating drops on tape for sure. So you got to see him hit the jugs machine, but I don't know if there's room left for him in this wide receiver room, but I do think the talent was there, and they stole another very draftable player in my opinion. So the Carolina Panthers, the definition of an A+ draft. I can't say enough good things other than the fact that I think they could have found another starting safety there next to Trayvon Merrick, where right now it's a competition between Damani Richardson, Nick Scott, and I guess Lathan Ransom. I think they could have done even better there and taken Malachi Moore, but not enough to overwrite all the great stuff they did in this draft, and I'm going A+ on the Carolina Panthers. Cannot wait to watch this team. I think the Bucs are going to be the favorites in this division, but I think the Panthers are going to be right there knocking on the door, probably with the Atlanta Falcons as well. But not so much the case with this next team, a team in a big rebuild, honestly here, but the New Orleans Saints finishing up this division. So they do the right thing out the gate. They don't take the quarterback with the 9th pick. They take the offensive lineman in Kelvin Banks. That makes so much sense for them. I think the value lined up. Banks was my 11th player in this draft class, so you take him at 9. Love how he's going to be able to help you now and then maybe give you a franchise tackle down the road, but I think right now he plays guard, and man, he might just be so good at guard there next to Fuanga presumably, and Eric McCoy next to him, that he's just like an all-pro guard and they don't want to really mess with that. I've also seen some depth charts that just have Fuanga moving back to right tackle and Kelvin Banks playing left tackle. I like that too. I think Banks has a higher upside as a pass protector than Fuanga. Fuanga as a franchise left tackle was always interesting to me. He's a good player, but I don't know that he's ever going to be that super trustworthy pass protector on the left side. For your blind side there, teams do still kind of value that. It's not super important, but it's at least noteworthy. So depending on how they do it, Trevor Penning on the last year of his deal as a former first-round pick, I think maybe earned the chance to get another year there at right tackle. So we'll see what they ultimately end up doing. But either way, it gives you that flexibility to get this offensive line right. And that's what Kellen Moore is going to value, right? So definition of an A-grade pick for me. Absolutely love that. And then we got to dive into this Tyler Shough pick with the 40th pick in the draft. What a wild ride, man. I mean, I've been banging the drum for Tyler Shough since February when I made him my QB3 in this draft. And man, I'm kicking myself for not just going all the way and making him QB2 at this point, seeing Shedeur fall the way he did. Obviously we'll see how things play out in time and all that. And Shedeur was a very unique case, but I wasn't messing around when I said that Tyler Shough has really impressive tape. And if he wasn't 25 years old and didn't have all these injury concerns, he definitely would have been my QB2. But how can you not factor that stuff in, especially when you see, I think, his fear of re-injury trickle into his game? He had a lot of these kind of like memeable moments that were going around on social media that I think gave an inaccurate representation of just how good his tape really was. I think some of his worst moments got put up in the biggest of spotlights. There was a throw at the combine too that got recorded that was going around. And, I think he gets a bad reputation because of that. Look, I think outside of Cam Ward, Tyler Shough has the highest upside in this draft. Forget the fact that he's 25 years old for a second. I think he had the best pocket presence out of any quarterback in this draft after Cam Ward. The ability to sense pressure, to step up in the pocket, to stick in a clean pocket when he's got it, but also to know when and how to get out of the pocket and use his feet to extend plays. Now, the caveat there is the concerning 5 to 10% of his snaps where I do think he gets pocket trauma. He does start to dip his head and look at the rush at times, and he loses that great pocket presence that he has. So you got to make sure you can find a way to get what happens 90% of the time with really good, feet and pocket presence from Shough. You got to find a way that he's comfortable enough to do that 100% of the time from the pocket. But I think his pocket presence gives him the highest upside of the QBs in this draft, but also his arm talent. He arguably had the best arm in this draft. This was not some rando 25-year-old out of nowhere, right? He was supposed to be next in line once upon a time behind Justin Herbert. He was, I think, the number 3 or number 5 QB in his recruiting class, a 4-star prospect. The traits have always been there for him. He just keeps getting injured. But the thing is, those were like broken bones. I don't think there's a real concern that that's going to happen again. I think it's more about how those injuries have bled into some of the bad tape that he put up. But yeah, I mean, this was obviously a huge win for me on this channel to see Tyler Shough go inside the top 40. And if they were going to take a quarterback in this draft, I'm glad this is the one they went with, because one thing we didn't mention with him, because he's 25 years old, he has, in my opinion, the most pro-ready processing and decision-making in this draft, outside of maybe Dillon Gabriel, but Dillon Gabriel doesn't come with these types of traits. And I think that allows you to take him here in the middle of the second round after you smartly did not use that top 10 pick on a QB in this draft, and it allows you to start him right away because Derek Carr's not going to be out there for you. I think he can handle it because of his experience as a 25-year-old QB. And that allows you to get a full evaluation on him so that when you get to next year, you can make a decision on if you got to draft the QB or not. And I think his pro readiness makes that a logical decision. And again, I think his upside, as in my opinion, someone that does actually have tier 2 QB upside. If he can stay healthy and if he can get fully comfortable and trust his body and not have these moments where he's ducking from the rush and playing scared at times. And I think also a lot of times he gets to checkdowns too early. In my QB rankings video, I described him as at times having backup quarterback eyes where he doesn't have that headhunting mentality to really, let routes develop down the field. He kind of gets to those underneath throws a little bit too quickly because he doesn't want to get hit. If those aspects of his game can just get kind of weeded out another year healthy behind hopefully a solid offensive line here with a great quarterback coach and Kellen Moore, there's a chance that Tyler Shough can be something like a Dak Prescott, in my opinion. I think the play style is fairly similar there, but I think his pocket presence is even better than a Dak Prescott. So I might be the only one here painting optimism on the Tyler Shough pick. I think it's fair to question if they were ready to take a quarterback. There were so many needs on this team. They could have gotten another key player on the D-line or at wide receiver. That is ultimately why I did go with a B. This was at the very top of the range I realistically would have been thinking about Tyler Shough. But I also have been critical of teams in the past for jumping the gun on a QB as opposed to just kind of, let things play out so that you are in a position to just comfortably draft a top-end quarterback next year if you're New Orleans. I talked about that with the Browns, with Shedeur. I'm not going to get all the way back into that. But there is a pathway here where, okay, if Shook does play well, there's value in that, but were you positioning yourself to potentially take a great quarterback prospect at the top of next year's draft and then use this pick on a more valuable resource to help that QB? That plays into the B grade here as well. It just gets murky. There's a lot to talk about with there, but again, I believe in this player, and I'm excited to see him go this high, that he's going to go to a spot where he's going to be starting right away, assuming the Derek Carr injury reports are true. So we'll see how this one goes. It got real very quickly, because in a QB draft where I don't think anybody would have blamed anybody for making any of these guys your QB3, this all of a sudden turned into like, Jesus, man, I kind of am a Tyler Shook guy, and now he's going to play. I really hope he's good so I don't look like an idiot. But here we go. New Orleans clearly viewed him similarly to I did, because I had a second or third round grade on him, and he comes off the board here. I actually had him above Jackson Dart, who goes in the first round there. So we'll see how that all plays out. All right, to the third round here, they took another guy that I really liked. I don't know if the Saints were watching the channel or not, but I felt like I was alone when I put Vernon Broughton inside my top 10 defensive tackles. I don't know if I had seen anybody that had Vernon Broughton inside a top 10 list until I dropped mine. But going off my grades here, man, they get the best defensive tackle on the board at the time. I think he's an impactful pass rusher. I think he can be a good kind of like starting defensive tackle, as long as he's maybe like the fourth best player along your defensive line, if that makes sense. Like, I think he can get after the quarterback as a 3-tech. Ironically, my low-end pro comp on him was Nathan Shepard, but my high-end pro comp was actually Stephon Tuitt. Like, I think the upside is really nice for him. He played his best football down the stretch, too. You know, for a guy that rightfully so was sitting behind all these awesome talents that have come out of this D-line over the last few years. Obviously, Sweat and Murphy there last year, and some guys before him there, like, you know, I felt like he really settled in and something clicked for him late, man. And if that's who he is, I think the Stephon Tuitt comp it's lofty, but like, man, he's got 35-inch arms, which is crazy length. He's really got quick feet. And because of that, he's got a signature club and swim move where he can use these strong, long arms to just kind of knock you out of the way, and then he'll sidestep you with that distance that he's just created. He's got a solid bull rush with that length. He counters off blocks really well with a spin move. And he's much more of a top-heavy athlete, which allows for this profile where he's got a strong upper body, but he's quick in his lower half. That helps him as a pass rusher. But in run defense, I do see him as more of a 3-tech, right? Because like he doesn't really have the sand in his pants to anchor and take on double teams. But because he's quick and he's got a nice arm over to get in the backfield against the run, like he can be that penetrator role as a 3-tech, absolutely. So there's a lot to like with this dude. Really happy to see that I'm not freaking crazy when I had him in the top 10 and as a third-round pick, and literally goes exactly where I ranked him as the next best available defensive tackle off the board. All of the guys I had ranked ahead of him had come off the board at this point. And I definitely agree, focusing on the trenches if you're the Saints. So to get the best available D tackle, got to give that an A off of my own grade. Now, this next pick I can't get behind. The Saints took Jonas Sanker and let the Falcons end up getting Xavier Watts. I think that's going to be interesting to track. But to me, Sanker was a developmental early day 3 prospect, really athletic, some good flashes in his tape, but really a complete ground up rebuild is required on his run defense ability. Got to tackle more consistently, got to trigger against the run. He was really exposed against like play action and play fakes and stuff. So like the processing from the back end compared to someone like Xavier Watts, it's frankly embarrassing to compare the two. I think he's got a lot to improve on in coverage as well. So that was a D grade for me. I think Sanker might work out with the right coaching, but Xavier Watts was right there, man. They overthought it, in my opinion, gambling on a slightly faster player. Certainly not a pick I can endorse there. But they get back on track. Day 3, they take Danny Stutzman, the linebacker out of Oklahoma. This pick made a ton of sense. I think it's a great landing spot for Stutzman, where he doesn't have to play right away. You obviously have Demario Davis, the ageless wonder. Who knows how long he's going to be able to keep playing. But at some point, they're going to have to turn the keys over there. And just a perfect mentor, man. I mean, Danny Stutzman needs to learn how to defend the run with more stability. He has a great highlight reel against the run, but down in, down out. I mean, he is just going straight for the ball. He runs straight into blocks. He abandons his gap. He needs to learn how to defend the run more consistently. But I actually really liked a lot of the stuff he did in coverage with that 4-5-2. Wouldn't be surprised if he develops into a nice starter. He was one of 5 linebackers in this draft that I really saw anything at all that I liked. Well, those 5, and I guess Sean Dolak, who's probably going to be starting for the Rams next year as an undrafted pickup. Of course, he ends up on the Rams. But let's keep going. They take Quincy Riley at the end of the 4th round. I had a 5th round grade on him. This would probably be more of like a solid pick. Ass end of the 4th round, he goes 5th round. It's about in line with where I had him. But I do really like the scheme fit and kind of how he can fit in here for the Saints. I had Riley as probably at his best as an off-zone corner. Really instinctive dude, great ball skills, quicker than fast. But in one of these quarters-heavy systems, I think he was a great fit. And for Brandon Staley to get him, as long as Brandon Staley's here, I think Quincy Riley can compete in this secondary for playing time. I mean, it's like he's competing with Isaac Yiadom and Alante Taylor. I think he also could potentially play the nickel. He's a little bit smaller than you'd like to see there, but I think he can do it. Did miss a shit ton of tackles in college, though, so he's going to have to clean that up if he's going to do that. But yeah, for DB depth, considering they didn't address corner at least early, I think that was a good pick for where they drafted him. But then you go Devin Neal in the 6th round, one of the steals of day 3, in my opinion. I had a true 3rd round grade on him. I think he's a day 1 starter in the NFL. I think he's got some of the best vision you'll ever see from a college running back. Just very rarely ever picks the wrong hole, hesitates to hit a hole. He also has that plus vision to see cutback lanes, to see bounce out lanes, where he actually, even if he's not the best athlete, he's got enough acceleration to get that corner. Reminds me a ton of James Conner in that way. He breaks tackles. He runs super tough. He catches the ball to the backfield. Man, you just put him in, pair him with Alvin Kamara, who at this stage in his career, I don't know that you can really count on 30-year-old Alvin Kamara getting the whole workload here. I think he immediately overpasses Kendre Miller, who just never had the vision to be a plus back, and I think we've seen that play out in the league. I think they're going to love him here, and a guy that has a chance to eventually take over this backfield, in my opinion, as Alvin Kamara gets older and older and older. I just can't say enough about this pick. The amount of teams that should have taken Devin Neal earlier, I think the Saints have a good chance of making them regret that. Then at the very end of the 7th round, yeah, you could convince me on spending a pick on a 260-pound tight end, which are hard to come by these days. I don't know if he makes the team. He's going to have to beat out Jack Stoll, who they picked up, who's a good run blocker. Foster Moreau's still hanging around. So, it's becoming a crowded room, but if the blocking can reach the upside that his play strength gives him, you've got a really nice inline goal line blocker for certain packages, 12 personnel goal line situations where Juwan Johnson's not really a inline blocking option, and Taysom Hill even has his limitations there. So when you're going to employ both Hill and Johnson, there's a little extra room for a bigger tight end. So I think this was a good use of a late 7th round pick for them. And then Fadil Diggs is a great value. I had a 4th round grade on Fadil Diggs, man. I don't think he's ever going to be a starter, and I don't think he's a very good run defender. So he's kind of a true situational pass rusher, and that situation is probably if you have someone hurt for a week, because odds are in a true designated pass rush role, you're even still going to have a more efficient player. But for now, the Saints don't, right? Foskey hasn't come along. Cam Jordan can't really rush the passer at this stage in his career. I look at this depth chart, and right now, after Chase Young and Carl Granderson, I think Fadil Diggs is the third best edge rusher, strictly getting after the quarterback in that room. Wins in a lot of different ways. He's got bend. He's got an inside spin move, inside counters. Just a nice player to have on your depth chart if anything happens as a 7th-round pick. Absolutely. And while a role as more of a true backup might not sound like a 4th-round grade, if the Saints are really smart, you actually can use Fadil Diggs like Syracuse used him a bunch in a lot of those kind of role-specific kind of rush linebacker looks where you can bring him in and have him hover over guards and centers, where he had a lot of effective pass rush wins in that role too. So he had extra usage in certain dime rush packages as well if the Saints are smart about it. So, yeah, I mean, 38th pick in the 7th round, absolutely. To wrap things up here, did not have any undrafted free agent steals on the Saints, and for their final grade, I went with a B+ here on the Saints, which just might be the highest grade we see here. I think you got, really good line picks there with Banks and Broughton, which was the focus for me on this Saints draft, was to get some help in the trenches. Those were both A-graded picks, and then, we don't need to go back through the whole thing, but I settled on a B for the Tyler Shough pick for all the different reasons we talked about there, and then had to ding them as well for the Jonas Sanker pick over Xavier Watts. To me, it's just overthinking it and going off a 40 time and not the tape, and that bothers me, especially when you're talking about a guy that's as good as Xavier Watts. So that was a ding, but I would say they made up for that, at least on, day 3, where they did some really good stuff. And I like to think that the B+ here is about as optimistic as anybody out there is going to be on the Saints, because I am a Tyler Shough believer there. And that is going to do it. Definitely let me have it in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts on my grades from this video. Ultimately, if I was critical of a player, I obviously hope I'm wrong. I'm just being honest about what I saw here heading into the draft. But as we head out, if you could, again, please take just a second to hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe so you can catch all of my draft grades videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Peace out.